I am delighted to be joined at the NDTV studios at the World Economic Forum by one of the sharpest thinkers on what's happening globally at this moment, the president of the World Bank, a man a lot of people in India look at with immense pride. Ajay Banga joins us. Thank you, sir. Sat Sri Akal and welcome.
Thank you, Ram.
It's terrific to have you with us, and I really look forward to this conversation. We'll go across all the different pagdis you wear and try and make sense of what's happening. But I start with something that was just announced, the Board of Peace of which you're an executive member. How do you see this play out? Because everyone's wondering, okay, so President Trump's announced this Board of Peace. He's got people like you on the executive membership. What happens next?
The real thing to think about is not the structure or the Board of Peace or whatever. You should think that's important because you need to get the right political buy-in, which is what he's trying to do by getting political leaders of different countries to either decide to be part of it or not. That's their choice. But that's what he's trying to do. The real thing we're trying to figure out is this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually make a difference in Gaza and Palestine, in a region that has been disturbed for a long time? And if you add up the full Arab world together, there's 1 billion people living there. And Gaza has always been the Middle East, that Israel-Palestine issue has festered. Is this a chance to make a difference? You have a historic peace deal after 2.5 years of trauma for everyone, starting with the attacks that happened on Israel and then the war that happened after that. Deaths everywhere, hostages, you've seen the images. So I think the real issue is, can you turn the page? And can you come to a stage where Hamas actually disarms? That's the political side of this. But then once it's disarmed, can you create the opportunity for recreation, reconstruction, create a new life for these Palestinians, and therefore for the region around them? That's what I think about. The politics of this, I'm not into.
Let's leave the politics aside. Just in terms of governance architecture, there's a certain post-Second World War governance architecture. The World Bank and several other institutes were one way of looking at it. The other is that the United Nations, for example, now dysfunctional. So a new setup and architecture being created. Do you think it can effectively work?
This is an alternative to the UN. In fact, I think the president today was very clear to say 2 or 3 times, we're going to work with the UN on this. He said something that he said in the UN GA when I was sitting there in his opening speech. He said the UN is deeply relevant. It has huge potential, but is it living up to its potential? That's his view and the view that many share on that topic. What I try and do is focus on what we are doing, right? At the end of the day, we're working not just with the US, but in this case with Europeans, with the Middle East, with the Saudis, the Qataris, the Turks, to try and find a way of, can we be helpful in this process? But 2 years back, I created a panel on Gaza. I got Israelis, Palestinians, Europeans, Americans, Egyptians, Jordanians, experts in different fields, from politics to economics to business people, to become part of a panel to tell me, yeah, if there is a chance of peace, when that peace happens, what should the World Bank do in the first 6 months, 1 year, and then in the next 5 years? Because if you start thinking about it that time, it's too late. So we got this group together. They prepared a report that I shared with all my countries that are members, EU and the US included, and the Middle East, and including with people like Jared. And when they began to work on this idea, portions of that plan are useful. It's broken into 4 parts. Urban renewal and reconstruction. Obvious, you probably saw Jared's slide with the amount of rubble and unexploded ordnance and the work there. But then there's the aspect of bringing back people, the diaspora, as well as the people who have been there and need to be reskilled and given a chance to succeed. Then what role could the private sector play, and how will they be brought in, the banking system and the insurance system? And then how do you connect Palestine and Gaza to its neighbors? And you heard the announcement of the Rafah crossing reopening, but that's symbolic. At the end of the day, the connection I'm talking about is a real trade and digital connection between Palestine and its neighbors, including Israel and Egypt and the Saudis and the Gulf.
The World Bank.
That's the kind of work we brought out. I think help with that.
The World Bank exists in a certain context where there's a rules-based order. What are you making of everything that's happened this past week and over the last several months in terms of tariff being used as a principal economic lever to influence policy?
Remember, we don't get involved with trade in that sense. We get involved with helping countries be competitive for trade. But the tools of trade, the WTO is a whole other organization. You'll get a much better thoughtful response to tariffs from Ngozi than you will from me. My view is very simple. My view is that actually, if you think about trade over the last 20 years. And if you bear with me for 2 minutes, I'll give you some interesting facts, which most people don't think about. In the last 20 years, global trade has quadrupled. The emerging markets, which is the countries we are interested in discussing, have actually gone from 20% of that to 40%. So their share has doubled while the trade has quadrupled, meaning the emerging markets are no longer a passenger. They are an integral part of the trade ecosystem. The second is regional and bilateral deals. India has a number of them, but many countries have them. In the same 20 years, they've gone from 135 roughly to 350 roughly, almost 3 times. In the last 10 years, 10 have been signed. 100 have been signed in the last 10 years. So if you think about it, the idea of not just relying on global trade, but also doing regional and bilateral deals has become important. Third factor, the opportunity for trade within a region is not understood properly. In Africa, intra-regional trade in Africa is only 15% of their trade. In South Asia, it's under 10. You know what it is in East and Southeast Asia? 50+%. I'm not talking about Europe, which is a combination. This is ASEAN. And so I think the opportunity for a lot of countries is to think about trade differently and to think about reducing your own tariffs, because a lot of the emerging markets actually have tariffs as well, and including India, but other countries too. And then the second part is, can you reduce your non-tariff barriers? You know, simplification of trade, digitization of trade, reducing border challenges, things of that nature. And then the third part of that is, if you do those two things well, can you also encourage competitiveness and investment in the right industries for your future? And I think India has done pretty well on a number of these, but the topic of trade, I view from a different lens. I view from the fact that the emerging markets are now integral in trade. And you shouldn't allow yourself to get distracted by one discussion on tariffs here, which changes tomorrow. Think about what you can do in that environment to make your country prosper in this trade ecosystem.
You've been thinking a lot about...
That's a different way.
Of course, completely. Very interesting way of looking at it. You've been thinking and speaking a lot about artificial intelligence and its impact on different things, and what I'm concerned about is your thoughts and the World Bank's thoughts on displacement, job losses, and trying to mitigate against that.
Now, if you don't mind, I've got that and one more aspect to it. They're interconnected.
Sure.
So most people in Davos are discussing artificial intelligence from the perspective of large language models, generative AI, the next process of that. Nothing wrong with that. I have spent the last couple of days listening to people in that, and a number of my friends are involved. The issue with that is, what do you need to do that? You need computing power, lots of it. You need electricity, lots of it. You need data in its simplest form, kept with privacy, with national security in mind, lots of it. And then you need people who know how to manage that. I would argue that outside of the developed world, other than maybe India, and I consider China to be more developed than not, other than maybe India, there are very few other countries that have that combination. And even India will have challenges with the power, right? So when you think about this carefully, you cannot have an AI system that is built only with large Western companies controlling this process. First of all, I doubt all countries will share their data globally in an open form. At some point, it becomes a form of, India has its own data protection rules. Many countries do data localization on all
now
that.
Data sovereignty is the...
I complete data is the new oil, as I said some years back, in Saudi Arabia, which is actually an interesting place to say it. But the other part of AI is small AI. Let's think of this as big AI. Now let's talk about small AI. Small AI is different. Small AI is what I saw in Uttar Pradesh, when I went to see with the chief minister. Yogi ji and I went to meet him actually with colleagues of mine, and we were looking at these farmers' cooperatives, and they were using a platform built for us by Google, connecting all these women with better seeds, better fertilizer, better water, crop insurance, that kind of thing. And these illiterate farming women were able to understand, point the phone at a leaf, don't know what the illness on the leaf is, but that insecticide will kill it. And I can buy it from my cooperative for 100 rupees. That's small AI, locally delivered at the edge on your phone with local compute. You can do it for healthcare. You can do it for education. My view is that if you only discuss AI in terms of big AI, we will lose the hearts and minds of the emerging markets, for whom actually small AI is a productivity enhancer today with no negative job consequences, only positive. See what I mean?
Sure.
So this connects to the way you asked your question, job displacement. Big AI in the Western world, as people are quite concerned, will first impact services jobs, white-collar jobs. And that could indeed, there's no evidence till today that it has actually led to layoffs. But there is a lot of evidence that the hiring process has slowed. So you could argue that is the harbinger of a bigger challenge. Don't know. Maybe it is. But that's not the case for you. Or that's not the case for an emerging market. So I think the emerging market should view AI as a real opportunity for leapfrogging in terms of small AI. It is not an opportunity if you only think of it in terms of big AI, because I don't think you have the assets in the emerging markets, India exceptionally, that's separate. But most countries don't have the assets to play that game the way they would need to.
You know, when we last spoke,
That's what I've been talking
just
about.
got started in your new avatar. We've seen you in your corporate avatar previously. The World Bank is a legacy organization. To what extent do you think so far you've been able to live up to your own agenda of trying to reinvigorate, energize, and make this a World Bank that's relevant for the current moment, especially given all the uncertainty that's now being thrown in the way the world is organized?
So it's an interesting thing, but to answer the second part first, over the last 2.5 years, the two topics we talked about all the time were the importance of private capital in the role of growth and development. You cannot rely on public capital to grow. You need the private capital. Why do you need it? It's capital. But you need the ingenuity, the technology, the innovation of the private sector. You know that. You're a private sector guy. I'm a former private sector guy.
Sure.
Governments enable, but they don't create jobs. The jobs are created. Even in the most successful economies, 80 to 90% of jobs are created by micro and small and medium enterprises, most of which are privately owned. So that's one big topic I've been pushing, hence the topic of private capital mobilization from regulatory policy and certainty all the way to more lending in local currency, to risk guarantees, to originate to distribute and securitization models. Yes, up. The second topic we've been talking about is jobs. And where I've come from there is that the emerging markets have a huge demographic bulge coming through them. India is gifted of that too, currently. It will change in the next 15, 20 years. But today, India has a demographic boom coming through its profile. If you add it up for the emerging markets as a whole, 1.2 billion young people are going to become eligible for a job, meaning age of 18, in the next 12 to 15 years. So 15 salon mein, everything changes. Almost the population of India will enter the workforce in these 15 years across the world, in the emerging markets. Those same countries are today forecast to only generate 400 million jobs. Now, forecasts are notoriously wrong. AI could change everything, depending on what kind of AI you feel. But they're not wrong by 800 million.
Sure.
That gap, that's a huge gap. And now let's take the opportunity. The opportunity is if you create these jobs, you get a generation that powers the future of the world for the next 40 years. Because it's a consuming marketplace, they're productively employed, they've got hope and optimism, right? It's like a whole thing. It's what my generation was lucky to get. And if you look at India, when it began to open up, our lives changed completely. My own life changed. I would not be lucky enough to doing what I'm doing. I'm not even educated outside of India. It doesn't matter any longer. That happened because India changed. And that same change and that optimism for young people is what I'm focused on. That means you have to create those jobs. I've been discussing that, and if you get into more detail, I can give you what I think we can do.
No, so let's do that, because so many people look at you with so much pride. Before I wrap up, I want you to talk about what you think is going right with India at the moment. Its economics, its growth. What do you think is going wrong? What more would you like?
I mean, the growth is amazing. As you know, In the last couple of years, the world economy has outperformed what everybody expected. One of those is clearly the US has outperformed. Number of factors for that, including the AI investment, but also I think global supply chains were much more resilient than the tariff story. Back to my tariff point, which is why you've noticed I said, don't think of it that way, think of it another way. Global supply chains turned out to be more resilient than people thought. And therefore the US stock market, the US investment situation is actually pretty good. Now, China and India have also outperformed. India is clearly a market growing at 7.5% to 8%. I mean, honestly, nobody thought that 2 to 3 years ago. And that's pretty good in this environment. So China is doing a little under 5. Again, no one thought that would be possible in this environment. So these three kinds of large places have driven a lot of growth. However, there is also another aspect, which is that in a number of economies post-COVID, in the emerging markets, almost a fourth of them are today at 10% below the per capita GDP of pre-COVID. That, Rahul, is the two-speed issue that we've got to keep in mind, right? And I think that two-speed issue applies in a country as diverse as India. It also applies across parts of India, but India on the whole is in the right side of that, while other countries have bigger challenges there. So economic growth, to me, you guys are doing well. I think what you have to think about...
You guys or we guys?
Yeah, I'm now an American citizen of Indian origin.
Dil to aapka kahan pe?
Dil to yahi hai in many places. I have multiple dils. Now I'm a global multilateralist. So everybody asks me, tera dil kahan hai? And I say, jam hai, wahan pe dil lo. Aaj dil Switzerland mein hai. Kal dil Bhubaneswar mein hoga. You know, that kind of thing. So I think you've done very well, all the jokes aside.
What do you think is not
I think what you can do more, and we've got a very interesting country partnership framework. The way we work with the country is called that. We've got a new one being drawn up with the help of the Finance Ministry and with the PM's active involvement. I'm going to try and discuss it with him when I'm in Delhi. Hopefully we can get it out of our board by then. And there are three main focus areas. Rural prosperity, because I think it's really important to not rely on urbanization as the only engine of economic growth. I think getting small farmers in India to be proud of who they are and get them a chance to get access to productivity and scale through the cooperative system. People made a lot of my statement when I launched our agri-tech effort of the success of Anand and Amul. I grew up in that era. Sure. I saw Amul transform India from a desperately milk-short country to one of the largest milk producers in the world. I saw in that the power of working together in a good way, in a commercial way, not in a monopolistic way. And I think there is a story there, which is the same story I saw in UP with Yogi Ji and in other such places. I'm going to see it in Bhubaneswar when I'm there in a few days. It is a story not just of one or two places. I think that getting rural prosperity right is another big injection of growth for India. The second one is what is going on in the urban areas can be done even better. Better urban planning, as you know, cleaner air, water, municipal financing. These are all good things. I was meeting with the Chief Minister of Maharashtra here. I told him Maharashtra is gifted with 4 or 5 cities that are actually profitable enterprises in their own right. Mumbai, obviously, everybody knows. But Nagpur, Chinchwad, these are all Nasik. So is there something that we could do, which our expertise in municipal financing, to enable these municipalities to access bond markets, reduce reliance on public money, increase reliance on private money, and drive a multiple change in the way these cities can grow for the future? Then the state can put its resources on those cities that are not as well off as these 4 or 5. So you kind of divert your attention in that form. So to me, urban regeneration done the right way is another good opportunity. What you've done is fantastic. What you could do is the next leg.
And we look forward to seeing you in India soon and for taking out time and joining us here at the NDTV studios, Mr. Banga. Thank you.
Thanks, all.
Really
Thank you very
much. Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you.